Welcome to the Wow, a place to rest, be yourself, a point where vulnerable conversations begin. A spot to ask, who am I? Where am I going in life? And what am I seeking? The purpose of the well is that each woman be seen, loved, and adored. So sit back, relax, and hear God's voice as Kelly and Colleen share well experiences with you each and every episode. I'm Colleen alongside Kelly.
I'm here.
So, Kelly, what are we going to give the ladies today?
Well, I'm so excited. So, last time, our episode, and thank you everybody for all of your support and enthusiasm about our new adventure. Today, I thought that we promised the listeners some honest and vulnerable conversations. So, I thought, why not? Let's model how to be honest and vulnerable and share a little bit about our hearts and how God has brought us to the well and how he showed up in our lives. So I thought today we would hear about God authored his beloved daughter, Colleen. So is that
Great.
okay with you today?
Sounds great.
Did put together a couple deep questions for you, Colleen. So I hope you're ready. The first is, how and when have you felt your thirst for God in your life?
Well, that was kind of one I had to really think about, but I think it was kind of always there was that thirst. And if I think back to, childhood, that childhood innocence. And then I think it was more in probably on the fifth, where you're just trying to get to know the friends group, all the kids, and then having some significant challenges in your middle school years with dealing with and trying get to know some of the people, friends coming in and out of your life, some strong friendships, some not, and then having some situations where it was just like everyone seemed to be, against me, and then making a choice to where all the girls were going to Catholic school. I pivoted and do school. So, that was where I kind of was like, okay, where are you taking me? And then and hit a little harder when I was in college, kind of thirsting for, what career path, kind of not really listening to his voice, but just kind of, asking everybody's opinion of like, oh,
Mhm.
where and, is this the right choice? There wasn't a lot of career choices back in the 80s. There wasn't what there is today. You could do women's studies and there was so many job opportunities that sparked women's studies. But back then, if I said I wanted to be a counselor for a camp group, my mom would be like, "Okay, how are you gonna make money doing that if you end up getting married?" And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right." So it was like nursing or nutrition,
Mhm.
being a teacher. So I ended up going into nursing and then pivoting in nutrition arena because of always trying to for good body, shape. But I think when if you really look down and really, what I was thirsting for was more when I became married and started having kids. When you're up those late nights and you can't sleep, you're in the rosary, you're ask for, some sitter was probably 6 months or probably around 6 months. I went on a retreat at in Life Center, which was right on Lake Erie. And I think that was real sense of, you know, finding him and really identifying that first of who he was and how I needed something that was more tangible and more of
Mhm.
just, praying. It was more of a deeper yearning. And I got that from that first women's retreat and actually how they broke out, having that quiet time and actually meditating and thinking on that was really the first actual more of spiritual encounter, almost you
Yeah.
could say like the Samaritan woman. You came
Mhm.
to a place where you're unfamiliar with who's gonna be at it. I didn't know
Right.
anyone that was there, but what they presented was a lot of the women, either mothers or daughters or cousins of a lot of the people there, but seeing those bonds and then building new bonds, that was kind of the thirsting for good relationships, not only with women, but and then that stemmed to always trying to find good quality of women in the church, and then
Mhm.
it started in, like, going into is when I moved out of Cleveland to Brecksville, just really seeking, what does he want for me, more than just prayer time. So I was
Mhm.
always looking for a Bible study, and then, like, that wasn't, you know, quite enough, so it was
Mm.
really doing some, book studies at the church. They always had something at, St. Basil's, and so it started there, so that's why I said I kinda always was thirsting, but it was more so when I got a little bit older and had kids that it became that deeper.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. I mean, it sounds like God has kind of showed up for you throughout your life and in different seasons, in different ways, and kind of you've turned to him in so many ways to figure out what you're looking for and seek his guidance.
And that's what's, important, just like, that John verse. She could have ran away, but she
Mhm.
stayed, and that's what I had to learn is just stay with it, especially in
Mhm.
today where so many distractions of where you want and so many material things in life that I've could have ran to,
Yeah, there's so many shiny objects kind of distract or lose your focus or lose your attention.
right?
Yeah. Who has been a person in your life that has always helped you feel loved, seen, and celebrated?
Have to say is my grandma. If I had to pick, one person, she
Sure.
was always she kinda took care of us when my mom and dad were working. She kinda, her and my grandpa always had a lot of people around. My grandma was, the type of person that would, if you're walking down the street and you needed a place to go, she would take you in, serve you a meal. There, she was Polish, so she grew up in the Collinwood area in duplexes where it was all of those, Slovenian, Polish people that,
Mhm.
cousins, and that's how she kind of met my grandfather. They lived across the street and they started kind of dating at probably 14 or 15. And it was just a big, happy, go lucky group of people. So she always would be there when, my mom wasn't around. So she would always,
Mhm.
sit down with you, make you a sandwich or we'd play games or, just make you something and was really there to listen and was always there to support you in any venture that you were encountering without judgment or shame or anything like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Sounds like she was really important in your development and like almost being seen through her eyes was almost like how God has probably always seen his beloved daughter, Colleen,
And that's,
ready to make you a sandwich and hear what you
right.
have to say.
And that's interesting that you say that because just recently, through spiritual direction, I've learned that, is God in that event? And
Mhm.
so you have to really sit back and say, okay, this thing, I'm going to go to the middle school girl, as hard as it was, and I probably didn't do it well because I didn't have that good relationship back then. But even going back and trying to heal that wound of whatever it was, abandonment or just trying to feel accepted
Mhm.
in that group. And even though I wasn't accepted, where was he in that and learning how to hear his voice in that, and it's not always easy.
Mhm. I know you mentioned a couple kind of significant events and moments in your faith journey. Are there additional ones that you would want to share with our listeners?
Is going back to creates a renewal in 2005, and one that men from a different parish brought to our church, and it's Christ Renews His Parish. So it's like there was a lag between that first retreat, and when my daughter was 8 months, and she's more, in middle school when then now in those years of taking your kids to softball and dance and football and to manage all of that, this other, renewal opportunity came, and it was like, I went to that one and I was like just reignited,
Mhm.
with that fire. And I just remember, the scripture, seek, knock, that one. And I
Mhm.
was like, okay, I'm seeking and I'm knocking and I'm not gonna, not be fire. Well,
Mhm.
that lasted for probably maybe 4 months. Life
Mhm.
happened. And,
Mhm.
I guess when you say, you start going and you start thinking of when did he show up, and it and have that desolation and you can't find any of um, evidence he's in your life or helping you through. So what I guess I'm trying to say is sometimes you go to these events, these significant, retreats or praise and worship, something that someone inviting you to any evangelical worship. It doesn't have to be Catholic. Yeah, he's with me. I'm gonna share it with the world. And it's like, oh no, I'm ready. It's like no more. I'm not right. I
Mhm.
still have that kindergarten, knowledge, and it's taken many, retreats and opportunities to really feel confident in that. So it's,
Mhm.
you know, to tell everybody that just because, you think you're straight, just keep taking steps
Mhm.
because he is there. And that's really where the well comes from, that you and I, come to that place, become vulnerable and ask, where are you? Honestly, where are you in this situation?
Recently, I have really been like appreciating the moments of the spiritual dirt,
Hmm.
where it looks like change or God's presence or wishing for or wanting aren't up, but doesn't mean it's not happening underground.
Right.
Like, I think this time of year is a good example of that, is like, I mean, clearly now we're seeing some tulips and some flowers start to
Hmm.
bloom, thank goodness, in the state of Ohio, but, like, we didn't see it for a couple months, but it didn't mean it wasn't happening.
Right.
So, sometimes those seasons of deserts, even if it's not apparent how you see God showing up in those moments, it's like just trusting that he's still there and still working, and I like to say conspiring in my favor, like behind the
Hmm.
scenes in ways that you really sometimes we don't even ever get to know.
Right, right, and that's something that everybody should kinda really be aware. Don't know this side until we go to the other
Yeah.
side. Do we actually know
Yeah.
why that and to us, and go and dissect it and try to dig it up and try to figure it out, but it's the digging, sometimes just
Yeah.
accepting and moving on to the next place.
Have you encountered I guess, how have you encountered the Lord and experienced his healing touch? Has there been moments where you felt like a physical healing touch even through somebody else in your life? Or I know you've shared a few of that. I'm wondering if there's anything else coming to mind.
Well, it goes back to, there was a group that came to, the healing, JP2 healing, when they came, and just the presenter, Bob Shoots, and I think it was
Mhm.
his actual brother. That day before I went, I was a day, and some people only did 2 days. And it was in one days that he just had people, like, stand up and he asked questions, and I just remember vividly the wind, feeling the wind when he was saying something, and I had never felt that before. We're all standing, and then he told people, "What did you feel like a light breeze?" I was like, "No, I felt," so, and some people felt fire, so it was actually,
Mhm.
and then at that, particular event, I don't know if anyone's ever the healing hands or charismatic type of stuff, where we would just, put our hands in small groups of 3 people, like, in, sanctuary, and just really praying and just feeling the energy of praying on people, and just saying, "Holy Spirit, come," and, at first you're like, "Okay, this is kinda kooky." You know kinda like, "Okay," but the more you felt it, the more, because everybody was, praying and laying hands on people, and in that environment, it's just, really, really, like, strong. Still a
Yeah,
little,
super
yeah,
powerful.
it's still a little challenging to do it in a small group, but I'm working, on it with just one person. I'm still trying to work, asking people with them and things like that. So it's, we're all works
Yeah,
in progress.
I love it. Have you thought of what would the book title be for God's authored story for his beloved daughter, Colleen? Do you have a couple titles that
Oh
come
yeah,
to
the
mind?
the first one that I thought of was, sought after daughter. And then the more I thought about that, that was one. And then, today when I was just reviewing what, we had thought about, it was Precious as a Diamond, a story of hope and healing.
Wow, those are really beautiful. Can you say a little bit more about both of those?
Well, just because when I was preparing for some of the questions, the sought after daughter, he was, always seeking me, kind of like he sought me first, even though I was like
Mm,
astray and just not seeing it. I was just thinking of, the pain, the well, like she didn't know what she was thirsting for. Actually, he was, seeking after her first of all
absolutely.
people. So that was kind of initially when you posed that question early on when we were thinking about, doing, the podcast. And I was like, good one. And then today over, more reflection and, questions, when I first went into, spiritual direction with mentee friend of mine who was going through the spiritual direction program at John Carroll University, and, we were doing, kind of a book, she was presenting this book, and you'd read through, I think it was part of the 18 annotations of spirituality. She'd, walk us through, that book and doing some readings, and I think it was, like, weekend, I had to say, "Vicky, let's stop." Like, I don't wanna keep moving through, and when I went to some ultimate, about the diamond, "You are precious as a diamond," that really hit me, and she's like, "Oh, yeah, we need to explore that," "What does that mean?" And then when you look, the diamond, the worth, the amount of quality it takes to
The
even
pressure, right?
what it how it the pressure to even excavate a diamond,
Mhm,
it's like, "Oh, wow." That is like you really think of, wow, it takes a lot, and that's why they're so expensive.
mhm,
And when you look at
mhm.
but then you're like, "Okay, what kind of carrot do you wanna be?" And that's like, "Okay, I wanna be a 5 carat." And then you look at the value of that, and it's like, "Okay, I'm worth like $1,000,000." So don't take, people for granted, don't let people walk all over you, set some
Yeah,
boundaries, really explore that a little bit. And, sometimes you forget. So that's why it's like precious as a diamond, the hope and the healing, there's hope really. exploring that and understanding the worth of the diamond and then saying, okay, what type of, gem, carat, and it might be, okay, a quarter of a carat, that's where you start off with. And then we can explore that. It's like, no, it's a lot more. And that's kind of how life goes. You start out,
Mhm.
working, self worth or self esteem. It takes a while to really uncover that, to be that beloved daughter, to be so esteemed by him. It takes some digging, some cultivating. Doesn't,
Mhm.
happen over longer journey, basically.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that, like, the amount of, like, excavation and just, like, all this work, like you said, like, hours and, like, discovery and all this, come out with this beautiful, like, pebble, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, but that's how we are in God's eyes. Like, he would excavate thing to, like, find us and, like, look for us, and, I mean, just kind of I love that image of the precious diamond. I think that's really great. Thank you for being brave enough to honest story, and a little bit of your heart with the ladies today, because I know we said that one of our main pillars was to have honest and vulnerable conversations. So we thought, what a better way for our listeners to know, like, kind of who we are and what informs our beliefs and how we live our life. And I love that. The thing I would do is I would encourage our listeners to reflect on themselves and, like, how did God, author their stories of those beloved bears. So the questions for review for everybody were: how and when have you felt your thirst for God in life? Who has been a person who has helped you feel loved, seen, and celebrated? What significant events changed the course of your faith journey? How have you encountered the Lord and experienced his healing touch? And then what would the title of your book be for God's authored stories? So I do have one correction. On our first episode, I said Sister Olga, the prayer. It is actually Mother Olga. So I got that. I got that wrong. So I want to correct myself for
So
any of
so
the
Kelly,
fact checkers out there.
can you explain what's the difference between a mother and a sister? Do you
You
know?
know what? I wish I could promise you that, but I will look into that and tell you, because I'm uninformed of what the difference is or how one becomes a mother. Like,
Well, and that's, I think, just interesting for all of us to know and to educate, people who are
yeah,
listening, whether, whatever religion that they are, or if they're, you know,
I will bring that back for episode 3. So,
yeah, it's nice
little
to.
cliffhanger.
Yeah, so when I ask you similar questions, which will be,
Yes.
the next episode where, Kelly will I'll have to remember to ask her when we get to, wait, what's the
Yes.
difference
Yes. Please
between a
hold me
a
accountable for it.
sister and a mother, in that is, hey, maybe all sisters are mothers and maybe all mothers are
Sure.
sisters. I don't know, but I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a hierarchy like in anything.
Yeah.
Oh,
There's gotta be a happy to look into that for all
right.
our
Just
listeners.
like in arts and everybody has to
And they're
have a
all beautiful and
right.
necessary. Right.
Exactly. Oh, for sure. Sure.
Can you close us out in prayer today, Colleen? Would that be
Sure.
okay?
No problem.
With our Mother Olga prayer.
Lord, empty me of guilt and shame. Fill me today to connect my story with another who might be struggling to find answers or in struggling with finding where God is in their life. Jesus told the woman at the well, whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst again. That's the promise we're standing on. Thanks for joining us today. This is Colleen.
See you next
See you
time,
next
and
time at the well.
looking forward to it. Thank you.